Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Matt Hausmann with HPE BlueData. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about our product, the BlueData core platform, and then also dig into our latest offering. It's called MLOps. I kind of polled the room here before the video started. It sounded like most folks were not very familiar with BlueData, and that was kind of what I was given, coming into this. So what I'm going to do is kind of start up and kind of give you guys a little bit of background, kind of foundation about the problems that BlueData was set up to solve, and then we're going to take that and evolve that into how we get into our MLOps offering. So I'll spend just a couple minutes on state of analytics, then I'll move over to the overview, and then questions as they come up. So our focus with BlueData is really on large-scale enterprise analytics, and if I look at the common organizations that I've worked with, is they all kind of start commonly, right? At the bottom of this is we start with the data. Let's go create our data lake. Let's deal with the 3 V's, the 4 V's, depending on how far you go back. You get a whole bunch of data together, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, we need to get some value out of this data, so let's start running some analytics, and then we start evolving into an analytic lake. Then comes PyTorch, Caffe, TensorFlow. They give us some really nice tools for the data scientists to use. And then NVIDIA came along with the GPU and said, hey, we've got these great things for graphics. They happen to work really well for neural networks and for AI. So these are a very common methodology that people are using. But the common foundation here is really the big data. And in that case, that's Hadoop. So if we go back a little bit in time, what's actually happened with Hadoop? If all of this is sitting on top of Hadoop, is relying on the data coming from Hadoop to get into AI and that progression, what happened to Hadoop? It's almost a bad word now. If you look at what Cloudera, the integration with Hortonworks, Cloudera has taken the word Hadoop out of almost everything that they have. For some reason, it got a bad name. And I guess the simplest way to say it wasn't perfect. I have a couple numbers here from Gartner. In 2015, they predicted about 60% of Hadoop implementations will never make it into production by 2017. Fast forward to 2017, they actually found out that 83% of those systems never made it into production. So for a multitude of reasons, is these Hadoop-based platforms really were failing to get into production and deliver full value. If I kind of summarize from the customers we worked with, there's kind of two things. One of them is on the business side. This was a new space, getting outside of the traditional SQL transactional world. They didn't know exactly what they wanted. So when they went and described to IT, hey, I think I want this triangle thing. And then IT kind of heard, oh, I think he kind of wants this circle. They go back, they procure, they deliver, and all of a sudden, 12 months later, it's a circle, and they bring it back to the business and say, hey, look at this great circle, and they're like, actually, what I really wanted was these 4 squares. So the agility they were hoping to get from Hadoop just really wasn't there. It took a lot of time to do it, and people just weren't sure exactly what they wanted. And then there was a huge evolution in choice. So I come from Teradata, decade ago, 15 years ago, from the SQL world into the big data world. If we go back to 2006, 2007, when Hadoop was coming, it was your solution integrator, your ISV. That was your choice of tools, is, hey, let's figure out how to make this work for you. And today it's evolved to, I've got the 16, 17, and 18 big data chart. It's really hard to see on this eye chart, but the big thing here is there's so many tools to choose from now in the big data space. It makes it's almost paralyzing to go and actually put a solution together. And beyond that, it's hard to see here, but the tools are evolving year over year. So even if you said, hey, I know how to use this is what I want, the next year it might not be there, or it may not be the optimal solution. So similar problem, kind of the reverse on the IT side, is with all these tools, how could they ever be expected to be agile and efficient at actually delivering and having the skill sets to support that in the time the business wants? And so that lack of agility leads to your black ops IT, leads to lots of copies of data, and it leads to the business often looking at IT as actually being a blocker and inhibitor of innovation. So that's the foundation for which these AI platforms are based on. So we've got Hadoop here providing the files, the images, the audio, the video that you need for your AI. But we've got to overcome some things with these traditional kind of legacy systems. Time to provision still takes weeks to months to deliver. on a bare metal solution. Efficiency of that infrastructure. Until very recently, Cloudera wasn't open to the separation of compute and storage. They just opened up their platform to supporting it to be containerized. So it really took a long time for that, that to mature. And what we were seeing there in the bare metal instances here is you're deploying Hadoop on bare metal is where you're deploying linearly the compute and the storage. I think Gartner has a number that most Hadoop clusters have about a 30% compute utilization, so very underutilized resources underneath the covers. The focus all along was on data scientists. They really missed, we were missing the boat on the focus of actually being able to take those analytics, those models, and to easily put those into production to actually get value from them. And then tool flexibility. There's so many tools out there that once you design something and optimize, a solution or a cluster for a tool set, it's actually very hard to add in new tools and workloads on top of it. And as people are getting more value or seeing the potential value, now they want to bring their big data clusters into the enterprise. This adds new security, new compliance on it, which makes it even harder to use. And then last but not least, is, as this is expanding, as people are making copies of things, as people are moving to the cloud as well, is there's a cost control, there's a data sprawl that you have to deal with. So putting all that together, kind of moving here into the BlueData piece, this is kind of the common scenario. Let's say I come to you and I need to deliver, I want to do video analytics on, I want to run some neural networks, and I want to train to detect something in a video. So I go to IT and say, hey, I need a cluster with 8 GPUs, and I need this much storage, running a Jupyter notebook, running Cloudera under the covers. Generally, we're looking at anywhere from 60 to 90 days. That was actually the response I got from a CIO at a major bank last week. 60 if they're lucky, 90 on average. So we've now taken 90 days, 60 to 90 days, and now all we have is the hardware. We haven't delivered any value yet. From there, now our data scientist says, okay, I got my hardware. I got to go pick my tools. I got to understand all the software underneath it. I got to understand the drivers. I have to get access to my data. I've got to come up with my model. I have to train my model. I need access to my data, to large amounts of data at that point. We're typically talking, months there as well. And then, we delivered a little value here, right? There's some data curation. We probably learned some things about our data. Maybe there's some things that we can reuse with other groups, but very little data or very little value has been delivered. And the next piece of this is where we actually get to delivering value with our model. So putting this into production and operationalizing, this is when you actually get the benefit of what you're working on. The last stage here is actually monitoring that model, and then taking that model when it's decayed, when the variables have changed, and put it back into this flow. But if you see this, we're talking weeks, months, quarters before you start to get the value, and in many cases, companies have a hard time actually putting into production, and very few companies that I see are actually doing that active monitoring and retraining and putting it back through the process. So, enter BlueData. So my first experience with BlueData was I was with Dell EMC Isilon. Right, we were delivering these huge Isilon data lakes, and we were saying, hey, why aren't people talking about the analytics are running on them? Why aren't people talking about the value of these these years, these decades of data, of audio, of files that are sitting in there? What was that problem I was just describing? It's really hard to actually go and set up and deploy an application to go and run that. So BlueData is really focused on, is this container platform that allows you to accelerate this whole life cycle to get the value faster. So on the environment setup, what we do is we virtualize this, right? This is all software defined, and we take this from months down to minutes. So we're leveraging your on-prem, your cloud resources, and anything that's available. It's a click of the button. You can go and deploy, that cluster. For instance, if I need 8 GPUs running a Jupyter Notebook in TensorFlow, this is literally 2 minutes, and you're up and running, and you have your own dedicated, container up and running. Model development, access to all the different tools you need. Again, click of the button to start up a tool. You don't have to know about the drivers. That's all abstracted away from you in the container. Access to data. We can tap you into your existing Hadoop clusters. And then access to CPU, to GPU when you need it. So you can spin up, spin down, destroy environments, start up new ones. So we're really taking that from months down to just weeks. And then finally, this is where ML Ops comes in, is the value add on top of our base BlueData platform is actually plugging you into that CI/CD pipeline and actually pushing this, and thinking about pushing these models into production faster to get value out of them. And the last piece of this is then actually adding the monitoring, not just on the hardware, but also monitoring and integrating with platforms that help you monitor your model and give you a feedback loop to go back and retrain. So that's really the focus of what BlueData is here, is basically a container platform that lets you accelerate the time to value for your data science analytics. So here's kind of another look at what we offer. There were a couple names that came up in the previous conversations. Openshift is one of our big competitors out there, so if you guys are familiar with Openshift, we do some similar things. We come from the stateful side of things. We really focus on analytics that need state, that don't just go poof when you spin down a container. They're coming from the stateless point of view. So we're running Docker containers. We give you an app store. You can run any application, any Linux-based application can be pulled into our app store. Out of the box, you get a number of applications from GitHub and kind of let's say the top 10, top 20 applications are out of the box for data scientists that come on our app store. You can bring those in as new containers. So we provide this platform for these users to come in, press a button, and now they have access to this now pool of resources, your on-prem and your cloud resources. We're talking compute, GPU, memory, I'll come to you in just one second, storage. Those are all now virtualized, and then when I want to go spin up a container, it'll go pull from that pool.
Is this being used yet by any other HPE solutions?
So we have a number of customers using it. We're still working on the integration with some of the solutions. So one of the solutions that was brought up, I think there was a presentation on InfoSight earlier. There's some logical points for us to connect those two. We do some monitoring within BlueData. They do a little different level of monitoring. I think one of the differences here is that we're agnostic to hardware. Obviously, I think HP is great hardware, and I'd love for it to be an all HP solution. But in a large enterprise, everywhere I go is heterogeneous. So I'd like it to be HPE if possible. And so some of that software, I think that was obvious from the previous ones, were more specific to HPE. So there are some logical points we can connect, but we're not fully connected there. Yeah. So with this, there's kind of one other value add here. We've got a couple things here: IO Boost, Data Tap, and FS Mount. I'm not going to go too deep in these, but these are some capabilities. Anything that speaks HDFS or NFS, we provide these capabilities to give you that immediate access to your data. So your Cloudera, your Horton, your MapBar, speaking HDFS, we can create a data tap so that when you spin up a container, it now has access to that cluster. So you don't have to copy that data into that container storage. You have secure access into it. It can be read, it can be read-write, and it looks like it's your own data. IO Boost, when we data tap in, if you're doing any large sequential reads, the nice thing about a file system with sequential reads, you know what it's going to go get next, so we can actually read ahead. So one of the instances where we've actually seen better performance than bare metal is actually when we're doing model training. So model training is typically, think of it as random I/O, but actually the way that the data is stored, like for TensorFlow, they create these TF files. They actually put thousands, sometimes millions of images in a single file. So we can go read ahead that whole entire file. We can keep the GPUs 100% utilized throughout the process. The last piece we do with anything that speaks NFS, some of our applications that we can spin up in our app store, they don't know how to speak HDFS, so as far as for sharing data back and forth across those, we can actually FS mount your Isilon, your Cumulo, and now you can actually share data in between the containers. So our key use case here, we had a couple presentations earlier about getting into the cloud or getting into that hybrid cloud environment, is for these enterprise analytic workloads, is giving you that enterprise, that cloud experience immediately. Even if your goal is to go 100% cloud, this lets you have the cloud experience for your users day one. And as you move workloads to the cloud or as you move them back, they would never know what's going on under the covers. Infrastructure optimization. We give you visibility to all of your infrastructure that you have, the utilization of the CPU, the memory, the GPUs. So now you can say, hey, do I need to go procure more hardware before I make that purchase? You can say, no, I've got a whole bunch of hardware here, and my people actually didn't even have to ask me. They just went in, if they have access to the platform, they just went in and they spun up the environment for themselves. The other piece with infrastructure optimization is we have a big push here around the GPUs. I don't know how familiar you guys know this. It's a storage group, but on the GPU side, it's typically one of the more expensive pieces of hardware underneath the covers. And it's very important that the workloads there are very binary. When you're training a model, they're 100% used. When you're not training, it's at 0. And so if those aren't being effectively used, effectively shared, then you're really not getting the full value of those investments. So part of this is when we talk about the as a service, we really have a big focus, and we actually have some additional UI and traceability to your GPUs about sharing GPUs, with multiple groups, with multiple applications. So if you go out and you buy, if you're deciding, am I going to get a 2-way GPU server and another 2-way, or am I going to buy a 4-way, or am I going to buy 8 or 16? Right, you can go buy that bigger one that might be simpler to manage, just a single device, but then we can share GPUs across the applications.
So when it comes to this sort of data science platform in the enterprise, I'm not as familiar with this market probably as you are. Is there a sort of an accepted infrastructure approach for these things, or is it sort of the Wild West? I mean, I would imagine that the fact that there's an HPE product for it means that maybe you're fitting into sort of an emerging paradigm for how to use infrastructure.
Yeah, so
of this sort, but yeah.
I'm not sure if let me try answering the question and see if I got this right. I think there's two pieces. So there's an emerging moving from bare metal, moving to VMs, and then moving to containers. So there's an emerging move towards containerization. So this is absolutely our containerization play for analytics. As far as the hardware or the products that you have underneath the scenes, I think you actually have to look at basically the development lifecycle. So what you need is do you need CPU, do you need GPU, do you need infrastructure that's read or read-write optimized? Depending on where you are in that lifecycle of training a model, of going out and just getting data, wrangling your data, of doing your initial training of the model, of doing the inference, the validation of the model, and then the real-time inference. There's very different workloads. So the nice part about this is you can have all types of infrastructure underneath here. And so when you spin up an environment and you say, hey, I want this light CPU environment with a ton of storage for what I'm doing today, and then you spin it down and say, hey, I'm going to my next step. I need to go train. I need 4 GPUs and this much storage. So that gives you that flexibility, because as you go through that life cycle of that model, you do need different types of hardware. Did that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I realize, but my question really comes to, in your experience with the kind of customers that you're dealing with, is that what they're doing, or is it still kind of this department bought this set of GPUs and that's what they're going to use?
I think on the GPU side, it's more this department got the funding for GPUs and they own it over here in their little fiefdom. This department got this. So this kind of opens that up, because when we see those scenarios, what we see is just very low utilization. Again, they're either fully utilized or they're not. They can still have priority on the equipment they bought, but that should be available to an enterprise, because there's, if you look at NVIDIA's numbers, they claim, for training about 100x improvement over CPU. If other groups were trying to do the same thing and trying to get, insights to move the needle, that would be a benefit to them. So yes, so people are kind of buying it and kind of putting up these arbitrary, I own this sort of things. This opens that up. Again, kind of takes your on-prem and whatever cloud resources that you're invested in and makes it look like one pool.
Yeah.
Well, in the future, Kubernetes is going to make everything one big computer, right?
Yep. So today absolutely. So it's providing that flexibility. So today we use Docker containers and we do our own orchestration. Again, comparing us to like a Kubernetes or an Openshift, they're coming kind of from the stateless, moving into the stateful. We're in the stateful analytics, moving into the stateless. There's a big event, KubeCon, coming up in about a month. I think
San Diego.
San Diego. That's right.
Chicago.
Be on the lookout for some good announcements from HPE there. The last couple things I hear, again, these are some of the use cases that people are coming to us with. The self-service analytics sandboxes. Data scientists, this is all very iterative. Spin up, spin down, destroy, change what you're working with, use a different application, try a different model. This is what this is providing. And then moving into ML Ops, this is kind of on top of this platform, actually connecting in with the DevOps process to give you that end-to-end AI operationalization. So operationalization, so a lot of focus today is on data scientists. And what we've kind of forgotten about is that model, like I was showing that time to value. If you have that model, the output of a trained model that you're confident is going to give you value, you don't actually get value from it until it's actually put into production. And all the focus to date, or the majority of the focus today and the tools today are focused on those first parts of the cycle and not on that last piece of actually going and getting value. So some other numbers here from Gartner. Currently, they're estimating, I think this is a very conservative estimate, that 60% of trained models that were intended to go into production never make it into production. That's a lot of wasted time. That's a lot of wasted resources. That's a lot of wasted, money, people, all those things. And just about every company that they've talked with, up to 85% are having trouble with the last mile issues. How do I get this into production? How do I move my big Hadoop environment and things that have come out of that? How do I bring that into my enterprise environment and deploy it in a confident, repeatable way? So again, the focus here has really been on the data scientists, right? The infrastructure, the tools, applications. These guys are out there. Their job is to build the models, train the models. This is very cyclical. They've got their little model repository. They check it in. They check it out. But in parallel, we've got another group of people who are kind of this forgotten group of people, and on the DevOps side is our data engineers. Their focus is on, hey, when someone actually has something that is going to go into production, how do I operationalize it? How do I build my CI/CD pipeline? How do I, set up the right tests to integrate tests or regression tests? How do I make sure, test the model, the quality of the code, so that when I put this in production, it's not going to blow things up and mess up everything else that's running. So this data scientist here, right, when they come up with a model and they say, hey, look what I've done, everybody. This is my model I want to productionalize. And they hand it over to the data engineer. And hopefully they've done their work to put it into their pipeline, right? They run the right tests. They put it in their CI/CD pipeline, and that gets pushed to a production environment. When this gets put in production, right, like I just mentioned, there's other things running there. It's in prod. There might be more data coming at another time. It needs to be able to auto-scale itself. But we're used to seeing business intelligence reporting about things that are in production. That's the same thing that needs to be happening with these models. So if these models are out running in production, our data analysts also need to be treating these as KPIs. They need to be testing the accuracy. They need to be looking for drift. They need to be looking for changes to the variables, and maybe it's not impacting the model now. So these guys need to be then looking at reports from that prod environment, treating these models as scores as KPIs, and then when they see something's wrong, they need to raise their hand and they need to be able to push this back to the data scientist. And this cycle is really the difficult part here, right? These guys have trained a model against a whole bunch of different data. There's all these different revs of the model. It's then put in production. They might have changed the model a little bit. It's sent out in production, and it was running against certain data. Now it's sent back here. If we've done things right on the metadata, on the model revision, this is really easy. You know what model is in production. You know what model was trained. We can go out and we can rehydrate that model, and we can say, hey, what's going on with it? And then we can also connect it into the latest data to go retrain it. And then since we've already set up the delivery mechanism into the CI/CD pipeline, we can now take that and put that directly back into production. And this is happening tens of times, hundreds of times. These big enterprises, maybe we're looking at tens of data scientists managing some number, of models in production. So making this fast, making this efficient is what ML Ops is focused on. So this solution is really about completing that entire life cycle. From the building and training, which is what the core product is really focused on, and actually deploying and then monitoring. So I'm going to click in here, a couple of clicks here. So we're looking here at another look at this cycle here of building a model, training, deploying, monitoring, this kind of going over and over. Our base BlueData platform is all about the building and train. Containerize the environment, self-service sandboxes, spin up any tool you want, secure access to all of your data out in your data lake, moving this to training. Now you had CPU, now you need GPU, you need access to different data, different tools, and then deploying. So now we've got containers. So our containers, the nice thing about them, are very portable. We're integrated in with a number of the runtime engines, like from TensorFlow, so you can actually run that and run that in production directly. And if this is underneath our system, we have some capabilities around auto scaling since we control all the hardware. If you have a certain amount of compute under there and you end up needing a little bit more, we can scale up, we can scale down, we can set some rules around that. And then finally on the monitoring side, right, I mentioned we do a lot of monitoring of the infrastructure, so we can tell you exactly what's going on with all your systems. We also integrate with some third-party reporting tools to help you, notify you when something has changed or has gone wrong with your models. And the last piece of this is with MLOps, we've done a deeper integration with GitHub. And so that's a very popular place where people will go and store and share and collaborate on their models. And then we also keep a native model registry and project repository. Again, I talked about if we get that metadata correct, this is where if we get this piece correct and we know what happened across all these steps, this makes this flow really fast. And of course, this is sitting on top of the BlueData platform. And so this is all part of, whether it's Active Directory, Kerberos, LDAP, whatever your security protocols already, that all falls into that protocol that's out there. So that's MLOps kind of in a nutshell. I was trying to do this kind of at a level, hopefully, if it was, the BlueData and MLOps is new to folks here, is now we've got this container platform, basically extended, allowing you to monitor models you have out there. We have these model project repositories that now let you hand off and collaborate with others that are out there. This is broken up just a little bit differently here. We've got kind of some examples of the applications you can spin up across the life cycle from data prep out to deploy, just some representative examples. And again, this is done in your hybrid environment, right? You could be training in the cloud and deploying, on site, and vice versa. As an end user, you actually would never really know where that was because we virtualized all of that. Yeah. So let me pause for questions. I had one other slide I was gonna go into, just talking a little bit about some of our recent acquisitions. I thought that might be of interest to this crew. Any questions? So
this isn't a storage platform. It's not a storage virtualization system. It's not even really a data system. I mean, what you're basically talking about is containerized,
absolutely,
operationalized ML. And
absolutely.
So is it internally to HP? Is this a part of HPE storage, or is this a separate company or a separate? So a little background. So HPE has obviously done a few acquisitions this year in this data science, big data space. BlueData, I think it was November of last year is when it was finalized, or day one may have been this year. So we were acquired by the storage portion of HPE, and I think a big part of that is the companies that they were working with and partnering with, like the Dell EMC Isilons, and some of the other, the big data providers. It made sense because those are the storage teams. That's where the data resided. Those are the teams that understood the value and the difficulty that people were having with it. So I think that's kind of where it came from there. But I think really what it is this vision from HPE, right? And I grabbed some of these bullets from our CEO's recent presentation, but it goes kind of directly on what we are. Right? HPE is already this great infrastructure company, and they provide a lot of great services as well. Where they're missing is on the software side, and especially on the containerization side, to deliver that as a service capability, and that's what BlueData provides for them, right? To give them that on-prem, give them that that cloud, that hybrid cloud experience, and also lets us move into heterogeneous environments where it's not Dell versus HP versus whomever. This kind of like, hey, let's actually do right by our customer and deliver them more value. So that's really where, from my perspective, and again, that's where I came from, was on the Isilon side, is where I saw the value of this. This wasn't about Dell servers versus HP servers. This was, hey, I've got all this data that we could get value from. Is, hey, how do we help our customer go and maneuver in this environment? How do we help them do it agilely? Now,
just to go a little deeper, and I didn't really go too deep here on storage. So I talked a little bit about data tapping, in our FS mounting. So that's us connecting and kind of making that data available to you immediately. We do have some levels of storage, but it's basically storage that we're virtualizing out of the servers. So that, the containers have some ephemeral storage when you spin up a container that you can use as scratch space. We also give you the ability to what we call tenant storage, is we can actually give you a persistent HDFS layer as well, using DAS or SAN. So there's a couple layers of storage that we can help manage, but no, it's not a storage product, but it is a value add to what you have in your storage. The other piece here, the other big acquisition was with MapBar. I've actually been pretty excited about. So when I came over, I kind of saw a hole here because I really liked, OneFS and Iceland from my previous company. I don't see the scale out file system from HPE. How do we complete the story here? So I really liked, I had no hand in the MapBar acquisition, but I really liked that acquisition because, at least from my perspective, I thought we were filling a gap that we had in the HPE portfolio. Additionally, when I look at what we did with the acquisition, the majority of the engineering team came over. So this was really an IP acquisition, and we brought over all the engineers. The same thing on the customer side. So we have a lot of great customers that really love that product and are doing some of the things we're talking about. Maybe not with containers in a lot of cases, but are doing a lot of the things we're talking about. So we're in the right space there. And then I do know, behind the scenes with all those engineers is there's a lot of work being done right now to integrate MapBar in with BlueData, as well as with some of the other offerings within HPE. I can't really tell you specifically what that's going to be, but that was a pretty interesting play from my perspective. And that kind of brings us to that final one is now kind of filling what I saw as our kind of a gap in the solution, is now being that leading infrastructure player, being able to deliver the full solution and also bring in anything else you have.
Are there pricing tiers for this? Is it sort of one size fits all, or?
Yeah, so the pricing is actually extremely simple. It's a per core pricing. So it's software license depending on how many cores that you bring in across on-prem and cloud into the environment.
Is there a data capacity component to the pricing?
Nope, there's not.
Okay.
Yeah, we're priced completely on the CPUs. I wasn't there when they made that decision, but I got to imagine you're going to size based on the amount of data, amount of work that needs to get done.
Well, when you're sizing your product to ingest that analytic data, is there like a guide to how many cores, how many nodes to deploy and all those things?
Yeah, so there is a sizing guide that's available that's out there for how big you need to be. The nice thing about what we do on the sizing, if I actually look inside the product, so we'll define, let's say you're a group, you're the marketing group, and you have access to this. We call you a tenant. Everyone that's in your group, we can define how much infrastructure you have access to, and then IT can actually predefine what we call flavors, and they can kind of go in and say, hey, listen, for model training, maybe you need about, you need GPUs. I'll give you a 1, 2, 4 GPU flavor. For this piece, you need this many CPUs and this much storage. So they can actually predefine that for you, or you as an end user, if you're part of that tenant, as much, you can go and define what you want to have for your system. But yeah, there are some sizing guides that are available for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is definitely a very exciting product for me. Like I said, I kind of followed this product over to HPE because I was using it at my previous company, and like I said, I saw it bring a ton of value to the space. And since then, they've really expanded it here with the new MLOps capability. They've expanded the interface as far as having a lot better and kind of deeper UI than they used to have. Additionally, this whole piece where I talked a little bit about the GPU as a service. That's a huge piece of really helping people get better value from GPUs under the covers too. Yeah.
So what's your, just a summary question, what do you guys all think of this whole thing?
I think it's great. I think there are more and more companies who want to get into using machine learning, deep learning AI, and they don't know where to start. in
Right.
most cases. And if you can offer that in an as a service sort of solution, you can give them that starting point so they can get to producing the results they want faster.
Right.
It would seem intimidating to build that in-house. I mean, to get
From scratch, yes. If
Exactly.
you've already started using it, it'd be less so, but you kind of, you need to be there before you can go further.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of where I was showing there, there's so many tools that are available to you, and to understand that those tools have interdependencies with the hardware, especially when you get into the models and the model optimizations, whether it's CPU, whether it's GPU, whether it's how many GPUs you need to have, like, that's a lot of work for people to go and understand that. And you might hard code that and deliver that once, but then, hey, your next, the next version of TensorFlow now has that optimized instead of for 4 GPUs, now for 8 GPUs. You have to know that, and you have to go make those changes, right? This is all seamless because we're deploying that under the covers for you. So that's kind of IT is able to preset that up. We do some of the work on the orchestration, and IT is kind of able to preset up and predefine that for people in those flavors that I mentioned. And so when they come in as an end user, as a data scientist, I want to spin this up, test it for a day, test it for an hour, and then spin it down. All those resources get pushed back, and then I'm going to spin it up again, or and try something else the next day. So yeah,
You can deliver this with the cloud volume.
The customers say, hey, you're HPE, why are you talking to me about any of this? I mean, is there some resistance given,
Good question.
the background?
Well, I haven't seen any of the resistance yet. So again, we are agnostic. The platform itself is agnostic, but I mean, HPE's got a lot of great products like the Apollo servers, right, that fit in really well with the model training of this. As one great example, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most interesting aspect of this is a product that a non-HPE customer could be buying and using not on HPE hardware at all, and that would be that. And would you consider that an acceptable outcome for the company, to have a company that just is not an HPE customer except for BlueData?
So I do come from the business side of things. I consider it a win if the company gets a good outcome from it. And from my days when I was as an end user on the business intelligence side, to be honest, I didn't actually care about what the hardware was. I cared about whether I could get my job done, if I had the tools to get my job done, if I could get it done in the time I needed to. And so this is a different conversation, right, than going in and selling hardware or just refreshing your hardware for the next, oh, you grew a little bit, okay, you grew 20%, we're going to sell you 20% more storage, right? Hey, I'm going to sell you this storage and hardware, but can I help you get better utilization from that hardware that you just had, right? Because I just mentioned earlier about utilization of compute in these DAS environments for big data. Is hey, let's tell you that, but let's also look at what you're using. Maybe I can give you this value add software to get more value from it. So I think when I look at it from the HPE's perspective, I see that's where there's also a huge value add. Is they've got customers out there that are probably sitting on, and it's not just HPE, but customers in general are sitting on hardware that's not fully utilized. This gives them a way to define uses for it and deliver it in that as a service way.
So, since there's a lot of storage people probably paying attention to this, is there a good place for them to learn a little more about big data or data science?
Yeah, so we actually offer some training from HPE. There's some learning path training. So depending on how close of partners some of you guys are, some of you guys might have direct access to that. Another good place I've actually done some learning at the MapBar Academy. So now that MapBar is part of HPE, that's actually open to the public, and they actually have some really good training in the space. So I'd recommend those two places. The internet, obviously, nighttime YouTubes are a nice way to kind of fast track and get some opinions on some of those things. And then, maybe I'll give props to some of the events that are out there, especially in the big data space. So NVIDIA, their GTC event, their big one in March every year. If you want to go learn about GPU accelerated compute and the benefits that people are having, that's probably the place to be. And then there's no shortage. I think I've been to 3 AI events in the last month. There's no shortage of other kind of general AI events to go meet and greet and talk about things.
I'll make another kind of comment to add to what Matt said. The part of this that he's talking about that actually sits in storage is actually a small part of what HPE is doing around AI altogether. We actually just relaunched one of our blogs that used to be called Infrastructure Insights, and it's now all about AI. And there's a bigger across corporation play around AI. One of the guys that is really well known, at least in the AI circles, is a guy named Dr. Goh, G-O-H. Very dynamic speaker. We've had him at Discover doing keynotes. We've had him in coffee talks when we've done coffee talks. I'd go look for that. There's also a brand new Twitter handle that's kind of like looking at AI from HPE. It's just HPE_AI.
It's a robot.
So you'll see a lot more focus around AI in general, and what we do around BlueData and MapBar is like a small piece of what fits into the bigger pie that honestly I don't understand because I sit in storage, but I know it's there.
We'll come back for AI field day.
Well, we're actually, we've thought about that. So you might come back, yes. That could be a thing because this is kind of a nascent field. If I can sneak up here with you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I mean, I think that that's something that we're definitely seeing. We're seeing companies approaching AI, ML, in the enterprise specifically as sort of a new area of focus, and a new thing, a new part of infrastructure, operations, whatever you want to call it. And I think that what that means for us is that it is something that people like us need to be considering and need to be focusing on. And we need to figure out how we can work in this environment and how we can be part of this emerging, AI, ML space. And, that's why, so when I heard about the BlueData acquisition, my first question was well, after what is it? My first question was, wow, what is HPE doing with this? And I think that this is really a sign of looking to the future for the company. So
I mean, it definitely lets HPE have a lot different discussion, like I was saying, than they have previously. And a lot of that is the customer that we talk to with BlueData. Absolutely, we have the products and services to back it up, but it's definitely a different customer or a different group that we're talking to. And, I'll always go back to, data, like I was showing that pyramid, data is the foundation of this. So kind of coming back to storage and the innovations that have gone on in storage in the last decade or so is actually having the storage and the capabilities to, the scale of this data and then the performance to actually deliver it, to actually churn through all that data. Right? This is really that culmination of getting value about everything that's happened with storage.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the transition from storage to data to business. So, well, thank you very much.